had a chance to watch last night. Working or what'd you think?
It was way better than the first.
Oh,
one.
much better, much better. It was actually a good debate.
It was.
Yeah, the moderator was much better. Now, I didn't really catch this. I heard it in post-debate discussions that she interrupted Trump like 25 times and Biden only twice. But kind of once Trump kind of persisted a little bit, she let him finish his thought. You know what I mean? So I didn't think it was too bad in that way. I mean, some people said she was really bad. Most people said she did a good job. I didn't like all the questions. I thought she could ask some better questions. What's up, buddy?
Ready for tonight?
You ready to freeze? I got all
Got some-
kinds of clothes,
You got
man.
some hot cocoa for me?
No.
It's gonna be cold out there, guys. You wanna come to the game tonight?
Yeah.
Eskimo suits,
You guys
okay?
know Coach Donnelly?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're saying, yeah. Yeah. Do you need any guest lectures or anything right now?
We were talking about the debate. Did you watch it?
I did. What'd you guys think? A lot
I
calmer
only
than the
had
first time.
two watch it, but yeah.
Really?
Well, he was working. I don't know what the other.
Don't you have priorities? Priorities. Debate up here, everything else beneath it, okay?
See, when I gave extra credit, most of them watched it.
Did Noah watch it? Who's back there in the corner?
That's Paul Schoenfeld.
Paul, did you watch the debate last night? I don't want to talk. We don't want to know. That's too much information there, Paul. I'll get out of your way. Oh, hey, how you doing? What a good looking guy.
You're live.
Ooh, hey, everyone. All four people.
One. Strange guy.
Yeah, no, he's in my math class every day teasing one of the students.
Is he? Yeah, he's a nut. Anyhow, yeah, so yeah, it was pretty good. I don't know if there were any like great one-liners, but the thing on fracking, I think, is going to hurt Biden a little bit. He in some of the earlier debates when he was going up against the other Democrats, he talked pretty negatively about fracking and fossil fuels, and, transitioning off, and Trump kind of called him out on it. And he said, hey, are the people in Pennsylvania and will listen? Okay, I mean, Pennsylvania is huge in this election. It could be between. Now, right off the bat, if Trump doesn't win Florida, he's done. It's over. Okay. If he doesn't win Ohio, it doesn't look good. No Republicans ever won the presidency without winning Ohio, all the way back to Lincoln. Okay. So, we'll see. I do want to take some time before the election, maybe next week, and go to a website called Real Clear Politics, and they actually have the software on there where you can create your own map, your electoral college map, and do different scenarios. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, but Biden wins Wisconsin and Michigan, how many electors there will be, and so forth. So right now, they're saying there's quite a few toss-up states. Like Texas is said to be a toss-up state. I don't see it happening. I don't see Texas going blue. If it did, the election's over. You know what I mean? And I don't see Trump breaking into California. He may do better than he did last time, but I don't see him winning that. If he did, it's over for Biden. You know what I mean? So you've got to make some assumptions in making your best guess about who's going to win. The last week has been good for President Trump. The polls have tightened, both nationally and in those toss-up states, or swing states, if you will. So I do want to spend some time on that and kind of go over that with you. It's kind of fun to do. But what we did yesterday is we were still working out the specifics of the Constitutional Convention, right? Some of the compromises. And I did a lot on the Electoral College. If you didn't see that yesterday, make sure you watch the video on that, because I do a pretty good in-depth discussion on how it works, okay? And we'll bring it up again later on when we get to the executive branch, okay? So it is a good time to be teaching government class, for sure. Okay, so we talked about electorals. One thing I want to add, one of the things they put in there, which is also timely, near the end of the convention, they're going to give the Senate and the House different powers, okay? Both of them have to pass a bill for it to become a law, right? But they also have different powers. And one of those that the Senate gets is called advise and consent, okay, of presidential appointments and treaties. And we saw this play out a little bit yesterday in the Senate. More specifically, the Senate Judiciary Committee, okay? Amy Coney Barrett, as you guys know, has been going through the confirmation process. That takes place in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And yesterday, they had a vote on pushing her forward to the whole Senate, okay? She did like 4 days of questions and stuff like that, okay? Then the vote. Well, did any of you guys hear what happened? The Democrats boycotted, right? And so it was a 12-0 vote to move her forward, okay? Now, under their constitutional duty, we pay these senators $174,000 a year. And what is their job? To advise and give consent or not to presidential appointments. So by virtue of boycotting this vote yesterday, the Democrats abdicated their responsibility. Yeah.
So how many Democrats are supposed to vote?
There were 10 on the committee. Okay, so 10 no-shows. So the vote would have been 12 to 10, most likely.
And they just needed did they need a certain majority?
No, just a majority. So what's interesting, okay, the Republicans control the Senate, right? 53 to 47, okay? So in the committees, we'll talk about this when we get to the legislative branch. Each committee is going to have more Republicans than Democrats on it in the Senate. The Democrats control the House. So every committee in the House, there's more Democrats than Republicans. Okay, so when I talked about Todd Tiahrt, being in the minority, it's hard to get any of your plans or your bills through the committees, to get something done. It's very frustrating. Now, this will move to the Senate, okay? There's 100, right? Now, there's going to be an opportunity for some of the other senators that were not on the Judiciary Committee to question Judge Barrett, okay? So that'll take a couple days, okay? And then they'll vote, okay? All it takes is 51 votes, okay, to confirm her, okay? Now, Susan Collins from Maine, to this point, Republican, has said she will not vote to confirm. Okay, so the Republicans are down to 52. They could lose 2 more, because Vice President Pence could break the tie if it was 50-50. Okay.
Do you think there were any Democrats that would vote for
That's a good question. So if you were to look for a Democrat to vote for, probably your most moderate Democrat is Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Okay. So when he runs for because West Virginia is one of the reddest states, and he's a Democrat senator. And so last time he ran for re-election, which was 2 years ago, Joe Manchin really has to espouse his more moderate to conservative beliefs as a Democrat. There's very few of them left. So like, he's a big Second Amendment guy, of course, hunting and stuff like that's really big in West Virginia. So Manchin is kind of his own guy. So he sometimes bucks his own party. There's very few. But we'll see. You know, I mean, obviously she's qualified, right? It's just agreeing whether you want a strict constructionist, somebody that is an originalist that wants to go with the original intent of the authors of the Constitution when you make decisions, right? Rather than a loose constructionist. You guys have learned this before anytime, that, kind of feels like the Constitution should be interpreted with the times of 2020, right? So really, that's what you're voting on, is a strict versus loose constructionist. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the advise and consent is something they put in the Constitution here near the end when they were compromising the role of the Senate. Okay, and then the first capital, okay, is going to be where? Okay, now the Second Continental Congress, they met in Philadelphia, right? They did the Articles of Confederation, okay, and they set up the first government in New York City, okay? But the first government was in Pennsylvania, right? In Philly, New York City, and then they will create out of the swamp of Maryland, the District of Columbia, okay? Okay, now, on September 17th, 1787, henceforth known as Constitution Day, the majority of the delegates will sign this Constitution. Is it over? Good, we got a new Constitution, ready to go? No. It's got to be ratified, doesn't it? It's got to be ratified by 9 of the 13 states. Okay, so let the games begin. There's going to be a fight over this, guys. We are creating a new government that is going to be much more powerful than the old government, right? The new Constitution, okay? And there are going to be many people that are concerned about this new Constitution. And those people are going to be called what? Anti-federalists. Because remember, we're going from a confederal constitution to a federal constitution. And if you remember, the boxes, right? Confederal, states, national, and then when we go federal, sharing or division of power between national, state, and local. Okay, but this one is going to be supreme. Okay, in Article 6 of the Constitution, they write up what's called the Supremacy Clause. Okay, that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and that national laws trump state laws. The U.S. Constitution trumps state constitutions. Okay, so yes, it is sharing or division of power. The national government is supreme. That scares people. Okay, so we're going to have a fight. Okay, on page 43 of your book, I've conveniently laid out many of the arguments for the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Okay, and what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes talking about. Would you guys like it if I put up some of my notes from my regular class up on the board for this? Would that be all right? Okay. Let me do that. Was it 43? Is that, you got two boxes? 43. let's see, this is gonna be chapter 2. Okay, I think I might have mentioned Patrick Henry being not at the convention because he was worried about creating this new strong government, okay? And he is going to become fully local anti-federalist, okay? These are some of the arguments that the anti-federalists make. And then we'll counter with the Federalist response to this, okay? The fact is, the anti-Federalists make some very good points, okay? Some of them are not good points, but some of them are very good points, okay? That this new national government will become too strong, okay? Now, don't worry, this will be up here for a long time, so you don't have to, you can still listen. This is one of the reasons why I don't like doing notes like this. Ask yourself, it's 2020 now. Is Patrick Henry right? Has our national government become too powerful? Obviously, that's a matter of opinion, isn't it? Okay. Is it doing more than the founders probably thought it would ever do? Yeah, I mean, we have things like Social Security, we have Medicare, Medicaid, welfare programs. I mean, obviously, they talked about creating a military. Postal roads is something they said the national government had the power to do, to build roads for the post office. Now, it did set up a system that we would allow it to grow and do more things. But a lot of those changes, do I have any history students in here? Really start to take place in the 20th century, really around the time of the Great Depression and the New Deal. Okay, we're going to see the size of government and what it does in the 1930s expand immensely. Okay, so that's really a question of opinion. Okay. He said that popular government can only exist in small territories. Ones this large would have to be held together by force. Well, other than, say, the Civil War, is our government controlling us through force with the things that it does? If you don't pay your taxes, can you go to jail? Could, if you do tax fraud. If you don't pay your taxes, what the IRS can do is garnish your wages. Okay, they can go in and take money out of your check before you get paid. Okay, so that they take money to pay your taxes. I had a buddy of mine, like he was like 21, maybe, I think, and he was like doing side jobs and got, he got audited by the IRS, like at 21. Okay, and he wasn't paying his full amount of taxes, and they set up a system to garnish his wages. Okay, he only had to do that for a couple of years, but he didn't go to jail or anything. You know what I mean?
Does that go in your record?
I would imagine. I don't know if that affects your credit or not. Like,
does your
you wouldn't have a criminal record, but I don't know if they would contact the credit agencies about that or not. That's a good question. I don't know.
And does your employer know that your wages are going?
Yeah, they would have to contact your employer to do that. Yeah, you don't want to get audited, guys. It's no fun. Okay, now we have 330 million people, so it's like the lottery. Okay, if you get picked to get audited, the government's going to send an IRS agent to your house, and they're going to ask to see all of your financial records. Okay, and they're going to look around, your house too. So like, if you make $35,000 a year, or you claim you make $35,000 a year, you got a couple of jet skis and a boat in the backyard and an RV, you're like, how did you afford all this on $35,000 a year? You're gonna get busted.
How do they, so do odd jobs, like what do they say their job is? Like how do they?
Well, you'd be self-employed, okay? And I don't know if any of you guys have family that own their own business. When you own your own business, you pay taxes. Trump was actually talking about this last night. You pay taxes based on what you think your income's gonna be quarterly. So 4 times a year, you write a check to the IRS, and then when you figure out how much you made at the end of the year, you either sent too much money into the IRS or not enough, and then you pay up, okay? And that's what Trump was talking about. They kept saying he paid $750 in taxes. You guys, tax law is freaking crazy complicated. Our tax code is nuts, okay? You have a lot of proponents of like a flat tax. Everybody pays a flat tax, no deductions, that sort of thing. But anyhow, so he talked about prepaying millions, quarterly. That's how you have to do it. Okay, so if you're self-employed, you have to write the check to the IRS. Does that help? Okay. Now, he said the strong executive that they didn't have a name for yet would become too much like a king. Now, have we had any presidents turn into a king? Or a dictator? Okay. The closest thing we probably had to that was probably Roosevelt, elected 4 times, right? And some of the things he did, as you'll learn in history class, were unconstitutional. He was trying to be creative and took things a little bit too far beyond what the Constitution allows the government to do. But that situation was corrected by the Supreme Court. Okay, so the checks and balances work. Okay, and it's really amazing how well it has worked, the checks and balances. We'll get into more of that, okay? But that this would be a danger to individual rights and representative government. There has been a couple of times where the president has been dangerous to people's individual rights. You go back to the Japanese internment during World War II, suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War. There have been times. Hoover did some things. Some people claim that Trump's actions outside of the front of the White House during the protests when he wanted to take that trip across over to the church, how they treated some peaceful protesters. They said they weren't peaceful and so forth. Okay, so yeah, I mean, there have been some times. Kent State University in 1971. There's been some times. Okay, but generally, this is held together. This is the big one. Okay, there's no Bill of Rights in this Constitution. Okay, and so when we look at the Federalist response to these, it'll be interesting. Okay, so I'll just go. We good on this? You need some more time on that? Oh, no, this is over here. Hard to see, but can you see that? All right, so the Federalists argued that the separation of powers, the separate branches, and checks and balances will make it where no one branch, especially the president or the executive, would not become too powerful. Okay? And like we just discussed, I think that's really been the case. It's worked well. Now, separation of powers means that each branch has separate powers. Okay, that the other branch isn't allowed to do. Okay, the president can't pass bills. He can't make laws. Now, have you heard of executive orders? Okay, executive orders are something the president do, but that is limited in scope. okay? Generally to the federal government, or it's limited to federal lands and that sort of thing, okay? It's like when Biden was talking about the mask mandate for nationally, and they said, well, Mr. President, you can't do that, or Mr. Vice President, you can't do that. It'd take a law by Congress to do that. He said, well, I can do it on federal lands. Okay, so he could make a mask mandate if you're going to a national park or something like that, you have to wear a mask. Okay, but or at the National Mall in D.C., that sort of thing. Okay, but he's limited in scope what you can do with an executive order. He can't make laws. Okay, so this has actually worked quite well. Okay, now they said this is where the Federalists falter a little bit. They said we don't need a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, and here's why. All the powers of the national government are listed. And nowhere in those powers does it give them the power to take away your rights. So we don't need one. And on top of that, many state constitutions had Bill of Rights in them already. So they would provide for a Bill of Rights. You don't need a national Bill of Rights. Now, guys, I'm selling on this one. I'm not buying this. And neither were the anti-federalists. Okay? And some of the states said this: Massachusetts, North Carolina, there's one other state, said, we will ratify the new Constitution if you promise to put in a Bill of Rights. Okay, that was a condition of ratification for 3 states. You got our vote if you put in a Bill of Rights. So I think we owe a lot of thanks to these anti-federalists. Now, we celebrate the Federalists, and especially the Federalist Papers that we're about to talk to, and the authors of those Federalist Papers. But the anti-federalists played a very important role here, okay? And that's kind of the highlights of the argument, okay? Now, minor arguments include things like, well, the Constitution doesn't mention God, or doesn't mention God enough, okay? So there were little arguments like that about it, too much central power. But the Great Compromise, which protected the small states, and then the checks and balances, okay, and separation of powers will win the day, okay? And the anti-federalists will get their way with the Bill of Rights, okay? Now, we still got to get 13 states, okay? And so 2 of the biggest and most states are deeply divided on this, and that's New York and Virginia. Go ahead. Yeah, okay. We'll just do this slide. It's pretty good. Oops. So September 17th, they signed it. December 7th, Delaware ratified. They were the first state. So when they came out with the quarters, with the states on the back, okay, first one they made was Delaware. Okay, and then they did it in progression. They minted them in progression of when they became a state. Okay, Delaware's a small state. In fact, it might be the smallest state population-wise. Okay, and so that kind of said, okay, the Senate's going to protect us. We're good. All right, we're okay there. Okay, but these 2 states, as far as ratification goes, it's in question. And if you don't get Virginia, which is the most populated state, and you don't get New York, which is probably the most economically powerful, besides Virginia, you got problems here, okay? So 3 men started writing essays and publishing them in the newspaper, okay, in New York. Now, these were read outside of New York as well, okay? But these 3 men are Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, okay? And these essays try to explain the Constitution and dispel some of the fears that the anti-federalists were making. Now, guys, there is a series of essays published also by the anti-federalists. We just don't focus on that because they lost. Okay? We focus on the winners. And the winners are Madison, Hamilton, and Jay. Now, these Federalist Papers that you can find in book form, okay? I have several copies. My wife got me for Christmas a few years ago, the Federalist Papers for Dummies, okay? Now, I don't know if any of you guys have tried to read those yet. You did see the assignment for the weekend? Okay. For the sake of time, I did a little different. Usually I just have students read and then discuss it, but I can't take 2 days on discussion of that. So just, you don't have to, guys, you don't have to write a book on this. Okay. Read the paper. Okay. And these are excerpts. This is not the full text of these Federalist Papers. Okay. They're excerpts. So get the main idea from it. The author's up there, just write down the author, the main idea, and then maybe like one line from the paper that stood out to you. Okay. And then that shows me you read it. Okay. And then we'll discuss it. Now, whoever lands on that day we discuss it, which will probably be Monday, they'll get the in-person. You guys can come in live if you want, ask questions or give input during that discussion. Okay. But they're so important. Okay. And I'll focus really on like Federalist number 10 by Madison, which is just, it's brilliant. It's relevant to today. All of them are relevant to today. And they really explain the Constitution. So besides the Declaration and the U.S. Constitution, these are probably the third most important historical documents in American history. Okay, so guess what? Judge Amy Coney Barrett has read these. If you are a federal judge, you have to know this stuff. Okay, because the Constitution is a very short document. It's broadly written. This fills in a lot of the gaps. So when you talk about, just let me give you an example, impeachment. The president and federal judges and vice president can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. Because jaywalking is a misdemeanor. You're going to impeach the president for jaywalking? No. Okay? So you can go, actually, in some of these books, you can go to the index and find every reference to impeachment in the Federalist Papers. They explain the process. They explain why they have it in there and what they mean by high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay? So this is of great importance to our system and understanding how our government functions or is supposed to function. Okay? Now, you know, they did not use their real names when they published this. Okay, they used this pen name, Philo Publius, or Publius, which means citizen, or citizen of New York. Okay, you know how sometimes when Trump says something, people just have to disagree because he said it? Well, people are like that with Alexander Hamilton. Okay, a lot of people don't like Hamilton. He's cocky. And so they're like, oh, Hamilton's for this. I'm like, I'm not for it. Okay, so they didn't want to put their names on this. All right, so that people could just read it. And guys, when you're reading this and you're like, okay, this is an old English kind of, right? So it may be a little bit difficult to understand these papers. Just know that the ordinary New Yorker could understand what was being written in these papers. Okay, so although they didn't have the educational systems that we have today, most people were educated. They didn't have a lot of distractions. So they learned how to read, and when they were bored, what did they do? They read. And when you read a lot, you become smarter. And you learn how to write well, too, when you read people that know how to write. Yes? Okay. So, New Hampshire's the 9th state. Oh, it's Virginia. Massachusetts, North Carolina, Virginia said as a condition of ratification, we want a Bill of Rights. Okay? And they're going to get it. First 10 amendments. Now, there's some irony with this. Okay? We talk about the Bill of Rights. So when you want to amend the Constitution, one way to do that is through 2/3 majority of both houses of Congress. Okay? So the first Congress in 1789, okay, the first Speaker of the House of Representatives was James Madison. Madison, a Federalist, did not feel the Bill of Rights was necessary. Yet he will be the one who is one of the main authors of the Bill of Rights. Okay, so there's some irony there, yes. Okay, and it's a good thing too because you got a very brilliant man writing them. Okay, so he will be the author, one of the authors of the Bill of Rights. Okay, and the first Congress would pass these Bill of Rights, number 1 through 10. Okay, now this is something we're going to be studying. Soon. The amendments. Okay, we're going to learn all 27, and it's going to be fun. All right, so they actually submitted 12. They proposed 12 amendments, but only 10 were ratified. So the first Congress was meeting in New York, March 4th, 1789. Okay, and for many years, this was the inauguration day of the president. March 4th was. Now, in order to get everything going, Washington was sworn in on April 30th. So he was the only president inaugurated on April 30th. And then everybody else was inaugurated on March 4th until they changed it to January 20th. Now presidents are inaugurated on January 20th. Hopefully we know who won by then. I'm a little worried about that. For the sake of the country, I hope one of the two wins big. Because if it's really close, I'm worried. We saw what happened this summer. I mean, I think if Trump wins, you're going to see it either way. I mean, they had that women's rights march set up for like the day after he was inaugurated. You know what I mean? It was like, boom, here it is. It was all organized. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to see protests if Trump's elected. If Biden's elected, I mean, unless there looks like there's some shady stuff, okay, I don't think we'll see a lot of resistance to that. Yeah.
So, like, I know it might take longer to all of the mail-in ballots.
Yes.
But do you really think it might take till January 20th?
No, I don't think that. And here's the problem. With the mail-in ballots, some of the states have said if they're postmarked by November 3rd, okay, it means you put it in the mail on election day, you've got to wait for that to be delivered and then count it. So, 50 million ballots have been cast already from early voting or mail-in or absentee. You have a situation where some states, they don't allow you to start counting the mail-in ballots until election day. So they're going to be swamped with those. And with the mail-in ballots, you have to check, verify signatures. Okay, and generally they verify those signatures off your driver's license that's on file with the state. You could see some problems there, okay, about verified, unverified, and fights over that going to the courts and so forth. Okay, which we had in 2000 a very close election, and it came down to Florida. Okay, whoever won Florida won the election. And they were having some problems with some of the ballots in Broward County always seems to be the last county in Florida to get their crap together and get their votes in, okay? Been watching this for, 20-plus years, these elections in Broward County. Holy cow. But they had these, have you guys heard about this, the punch card ballots? So it's a card, and it's perforated, and you poke a hole, and the little piece of paper falls out. Okay, those are called chads. Okay, the little chat of paper, okay? And so when they're counting these votes, some of the chads are not pushed all the way through and might be dangling. You count that as a vote if it's a dangling chat or a hanging chat. Or then you have dimpled chats, like maybe an old person couldn't push hard enough to break through the chat, and it was pushed, but it wasn't broken. Dimpled chats. And so people are like holding these up to the lights. It had to go to the courts. Supreme Court of Florida sided with Al Gore. The U.S. Supreme Court sided with Bush. They did a recount in just that county, and then they declared the winner. Yeah, so I hope we don't see a lot of that. But both parties have lawyers ready to go. Once you get the lawyers involved, who knows?